first of all, welcome everybody. Thank you very much to FEI, to Vince, to the other folks in the room for having me. I appreciate it. I'm here to talk about my favorite subject, definitely my favorite subject, which is networking. I titled this Networking for Life for a particular reason, because networking really needs to be the way you live your life. It can't be something you do once in a while, especially probably for most of the people, pretty much everybody in this room. I would say that it's really, and that's a bit of a paradigm shift, in my opinion, but it's the direction that we're going. And through this presentation, I'll get into some of the reasons why I feel that that's the case, and we'll get into some other things as it relates to how you actually do this thing called networking, because I think a lot of times people are told to network, and it's what does that necessarily mean? So we'll have some fun this morning, and if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. We'll make this interactive, and we'll have a good time, right? So, a couple of things. Number one, these are the things I'll go through today. Actually, you know what? Would you mind sitting next to them and tapping for me? So Nick and I work together. Nick is with Baker Tilly as well. He recruits for our interim practice. And I'll tell you a little bit about our practice. Well, this is not in any way, shape, or form a commercial for Baker Tilly, but I do want to ground us kind of in who I am and who we are. So we'll talk about what is networking, how is it defined, and how should it be defined, what is the new paradigm, kind of where are things going from the perspective of networking, and what is everybody in this room, kind of how does each person here fit into that, if you will. What do you get out of networking, both personally as well as professionally? There's a lot to get out of networking, and it is not getting a job. That is not the reason that you network. Although it's one of the reasons that you network, and one of the things you might get out of networking and get out of the enjoyment of networking, but it's not the reason that you do it. How do you differentiate yourself? Certainly very important these days. We're really working in a world today where a lot of the non-value added work, if you will, is being sent offshore or being done through technology. So every individual really needs to be able to say, what is it that makes me different? And we'll talk a little bit about that theoretically as well as practically. How do you kind of think about that? How do you differentiate yourself? And how do you build your own brand in the marketplace over time? What do you represent? What is your personal brand? So that's something everybody in the room kind of needs to figure out and be honest with yourselves about. And that does evolve over time. What is the process of networking? Like I said, how do you actually do it? Everything's a process. So we have a lot of finance and accounting people here. We all like process. What is the process to networking? And when are you done? The answer to that question is never. How do you leverage your network built in transition once you land? Pretty much every executive in transition that I sit down with, I say the following things. Number one, I don't care if you land. I don't care if I help you to land. I care that you land and you wind up where you want to be. And if I can help you to do that, that's all I care about. Most people, when I ask them the question, how much networking do you do? And I'll ask that question if I'm sitting down with a potential client, because I'm looking to build a relationship other than just a sales relationship. I'm looking to build a true business or personal, really not a business relationship, a personal relationship with that individual. And, the way that I'm going to understand is asking them things not just about what they might need from me, but from a business perspective. But I want to take it in the direction of how could I, over time, be a business resource and a personal resource to you. So I'll always ask the question. And 9 out of 10 people, and often Nick is with me, people will kind of look down, I don't do as much networking as I should. I know I don't. And, now that I'm in transition, I realize I need to do it. And that's absolutely fine. I say to people, don't apologize. It's okay, you didn't do anything wrong, but now is the time to do it, and then I will, for lack of a better word, evangelize around why it's important, what it's done for me, and when people get in touch with me and they've landed, I'll tell them, now you need to make sure you keep networking, and I'm going to challenge you to do it. So how do you do that? And then the difference between contacts and relationships, no free lunch. So meeting people at a networking event and having coffee, a lunch or something like that, and then doing nothing after that is not building a relationship. It's a contact. It's somebody you can call. They may get back to you, they may not, but there's no relationship there. Now, I look around this room, and there's people that I have true relationships with. There's also people that are contacts of mine. And those contacts, I truly hope to turn into relationships over time, but that is not something that you can kid yourself about. Either there's a relationship there or there isn't. And I think often people kid themselves or don't really understand maybe the difference between a contact and a true relationship. So who am I? So one of the things that I always tell people is to lead with, sincerity certainly, But to share personal information about yourself, go there first. Be a human being. Let people know who you really are, because we're not all a collection of skill sets. We're people, and people connect with people. A lot of this really is human psychology and social psychology, and the way that people interact with one another and build relationships and trust one another. People have said to me over the years, people do business with people they know. I agree with that, but I challenge it, because there's people that I know that I don't trust, that I'd never do business with, but I'd have a beer with them, I'd sit down and have a good time with them, might watch a game with them or something like that, but I might never do business with them. So the question becomes, how do you build that trust? And again, there is no free lunch in doing it. So, who am I? So I spent 4 years with Accenture in financial strategy consulting. Did some interesting work at Accenture. There are still relationships that I maintain. Actually, one little anecdote I'll tell. Did a project internally for the firm for a gentleman named Tony Colin, who is, he was the corporate controller until recently. Now he's still a managing director. He's kind of going toward retirement. And Tony was, I don't want to say Tony was difficult. Tony was, I looked at him as maybe difficult at that point in my career, because he was challenging to me, and he expected me to have the answer when I walked into the room. So I learned things from him. I considered him a mentor, and I stayed in touch with him over the years. And we've developed a true relationship. And recently he got in touch with me about his daughter, who's potentially looking to make some things happen from a career perspective. And I worked with Tony 12, 13 years ago. So when I was on a trip actually when I got that email, and it filled me with, to be honest with you, it filled me with great pride that he remembered me, that he thought enough of me in that relationship. But I reach out to Tony every 3 to 6 months just to see how things are going, to see how his kids are doing. I'm not looking for anything other than how are you? So just as an example. So I maintain those relationships. Now I've worked for multiple publicly traded consulting organizations. I was looking for something. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I was looking for the place where I could truly add the most value to my network, selflessly, independent of driving revenue or gross margin over time. I felt that if I could differentiate myself and differentiate the offerings, what I represent to the marketplace, then I'm going to be relevant, and I'm going to make a difference for people. There are people in this room that I have a lot of respect for in this business. But as I looked at the behaviors of some of the firms, it was often, publicly traded companies need to drive revenue, they need to drive gross margin. It's what they do for Wall Street. My personal bias, and I also tend to be, and I certainly have opinions and I share them. My personal bias is that it's very difficult for a professional services firm to be publicly traded, because it's very difficult to serve all of those masters. I respect the firms that do it. I believe that the professionals in those firms do the best job of balancing their, what they need to deliver to different audiences. But at the end of the day, a publicly traded company is there to serve Wall Street. And I'm not there to serve Wall Street. I'm there to serve the community. And it's been very interesting working in a partnership, because those behaviors are quite a bit different. It's truly a long-term view rather than that for lack of a better word, transactional quarter-to-quarter view. Again, I respect it, but the direction that I see things going from the perspective of the people business, and it's people that come to the table to do work for companies, it's not about driving revenue and gross margin. It's got to be about the individual. And that's something that you prove over time. It's one thing to sit down and tell somebody it's about them. It's another thing to show over time and over years that it really is about them. So I left the business, and I went into the life insurance business. My wife's father is very differentiated in that space, and I didn't realize how differentiated you could be in that space. But it was really about, how am I going to be really relevant to my network that I've come to care about over time. I don't separate my personal and professional network. They're all one. I suggest everybody in this room do that. When I sat down and talked to them, I realized, okay, many people, my generation are not as well planned as we thought we were. 2008 certainly taught us that. And so I left, and then Baker Tilly got in touch with me with an opportunity, and I realized, okay, number one, I said no. I said I wasn't interested. But I'll sit down with you and I'll meet with you, because this whole thing is about networking, getting to know people. You never know where things are going to go. We sat down and talked, and I realized, okay, this is the opportunity for me to differentiate. The ability to provide individual professionals, the ability to provide recruitment services backed up by all of the knowledge and resources of a large CPA firm in an environment where the regulatory environment's more complicated and companies need to do more with less. I felt that going forward, given the macro environment, which has changed, that I would be most relevant to my network being in an organization like this. So it was a difficult decision to leave working with my wife's father, but I came to Baker Tilly after doing 4 months of due diligence, so it was a lot of networking with partners and such in the firm, and it wasn't to understand the technical competencies of the firm. It was to understand the human element of the firm and whether this firm really lived the values that it puts out there. And I found, in my opinion, that it did. You know, I'll leave that to everybody's personal opinion and such, but, you know, I'm having a good time at this firm and we're doing some good things, and mostly we're doing, you know, I feel like we're doing good things for people, and that's what it's really all about. I have a wife named Lisa. We've been together for 23 years. I have 3 kids, 13, 10, and 6, Andrew, Dylan, and Elizabeth, and then my golden retriever, Jerry, who is my best buddy. So again, you know, I want all of you to get to know me, and I suggest that all of you get to know the individuals in this room as people, not just as collections of skill sets. So real quickly about Baker Tilly. This is not a Baker Tilly commercial, just so you know who we are. Founded is Virchow Krause. We have offices around the Midwest. We're kind of expanding to the East Coast. Washington, D.C., we do a lot of work with the government, do a lot of work with private equity firms and their portfolio companies. Another reason I joined the firm, because I see a lot of things going on in the private equity world, private equity carve-outs, those types of things. And there's needs in that space, and those needs tend to be very specific types of skill sets, and through a model like the one that I run at Baker Tilly, we can provide that. Entered Chicago in 2004 through an acquisition of a firm called Kupferberg, Goldberg, and Niemark. What basically happened is our CEO, Tim Christian, looked around in end of the 90s and said, you know what, if I don't start to go out and find some firms to buy, I'm going to get bought, and I don't want to get bought. So I'm going to become big enough. The reason was that really it was a culture issue. Did not want the culture to change. We very, very fiercely guard the culture of the firm. And that's very important, I feel, in a professional services firm. Rebranded as Baker Tilly in 2009. There was some confusion about who we were in the marketplace internationally. So we're part of the 8th largest international network of CPA firms. Broad range of services, and then the culture of the firm. Now, the group that I run is called Baker Tilly Search and Staffing. It's probably somewhat a misnomer. It's really more of a project consulting, interim executive recruitment practice. We have a retained group, we have a contingency group, but again, the differentiator is our ability to back up our searches and back up our individual professionals with the knowledge and resources of a CPA firm. Difference between being a sales organization and a knowledge organization competing in the space of people. I felt that could be a real differentiator around finding that our clients, most importantly, are seeing those differentiators, and that matters to me. So this has been wonderful. Firm was founded in 1995. I'm sorry, Baker Tilly Search and Staffing was founded in 1995. We have offices in Madison, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis. We launched Chicago practice in 2011. I joined at the beginning of 2013. As I said, we provide interim professionals, project professionals, direct hire. So we went over these things. So you can go to the next slide. So networking, what we're here to talk about. Go to the next slide. All right, so I am wondering what everybody in this room, well actually, let's do this first. Go to the, hit again. All right, so Webster's definition of networking. Supportive system of sharing information and services among individuals and groups having a common interest. To cultivate people who can be helpful to one professionally, especially in finding employment or moving to a higher position. So this is what Webster had to say. I'm wondering what people think about this. Bill.
I usually define it as a process of relationship building involving connecting, following up, and staying in touch.
I like that. That's getting more toward where I'm kind of going. Anybody else?
That's slide 1 of the presentation I usually do.
And I'm going to use Phil as an example real quickly. Again, I've gotten to know people in this room. Phil and I've gotten to know one another. Phil runs networking groups. Phil is somebody that I see as, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, but I'm embarrassed you. But Phil is somebody that I see as trying to bring value to the marketplace. Not just bringing his skill sets, but saying, I'm going to selflessly give something back, regardless of whether I get something back. Now, if anybody here has ever studied game theory proves that this makes sense. This is not a discussion on game theory because I could start going down on a tangent. But you could probably, well, you could prove mathematically that this works. And by works, that sounds bad because it's not about like making it work for your advantage. It's just, if you do good, it's the old adage, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. There's a reason that those little cliches, start. Anybody else? Thoughts? I know it's early. Yes?
I think the second point sounds a little self-serving and one-sided. And I think that's the issue, is that networking really is just developing that relationship, not necessarily with always a specific ends in mind, but just to build that relationship and enjoy that camaraderie, other colleagues, et cetera.
Absolutely. You hit it right on the head. In my opinion, networking is about giving value, not taking value. And I'm going to go into some things about the types of people that you meet in business and in life and that type of thing in a few minutes here. But a lot of people start networking when they're not working, and then they stop networking when they are working. And that comes across very bluntly as somewhat self-serving and somewhat opportunistic. And one of the things we'll talk about is how do you get pull through from the perspective of the networking that you do while you're in transition once you land. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk about a new definition of networking. And this is, I wrote this. So selflessly helping others with whom one shares a common interest or bond, with the understanding that assistance provided today will continue to make the entire network stronger in the long run. You think about a network, and to me, it's building strength amongst the people, the computers, whatever it is in that network. The more solid that network is, the more it's going to support the weight of the network, if you will. So it's really about supporting one another, and supporting means giving, not taking. Looking to give value to other people through quality introductions and sincerely unselfish behavior. Sincerely, you cannot fake sincerity. Either you're sincere or you're not, and people will figure it out. With the trust that value will come back to those that stay true to their networking partners over time. So I'm wondering, is this kind of going in more the right direction? Anybody add anything to this? Good. Okay. So this is the direction that, you know, that as I've networked over the past, when did I leave Accenture? 2002. 11 or so years. What I found is over time, this becomes profound, but it doesn't happen immediately, and a lot of people expect it to happen immediately, and it's a process. All right, next slide. So there are different types of people we meet in business and in life. Anybody read the book Give and Take by Adam Grant? So everybody's going to leave and go buy the book. And then Adam's going to pay me a fee. No, I'm just kidding. Although I have been in touch with Adam. I read about Adam Grant about a year ago in Forbes. I read about his book called Give and Take. The book basically talks about how giving is the new secret to success. Now, I challenge that a bit because I think giving has always been the secret to success. But one of the things that Adam talks about a few different things in the book, which I'm going to use as examples today. And one of the things he talks about is the different types of people we meet in business and in life. And the reason I don't just say in business is because I don't believe in separating your business and your personal relationships. They're all one. We're all sincere. If you do something for a friend, think about doing the same thing for somebody you meet through business, because why not? We're all human beings. So different types of people you meet. Takers like to take more than they give. So we can all think about people that we know that are takers. One example given in the book is Ken Lay and Jeff Skilling at Enron. Clearly takers of value. And when you look at their annual report, interestingly enough, it's a big full-page picture of Ken Lay and Jeff Skilling. Big full page. Well, it's clearly about them and not their people. So you can, and Adam talks about it, you can even read a LinkedIn profile or a Facebook profile and determine whether somebody is a giver or a taker. Now, I'm going to use other examples in the room because I know people here. So Steve Kalisher is somebody I've gotten to know over probably that's 8 to 10 or so years. I consider us having a relationship, not just a contact type relationship. And Steve's one of the most giving people I know. Truly, he really is. And this gets me, I'm not going to get verklempt or anything here, but when I get the emails from Steve about a free referral, these emails are not written from the perspective, this is my client, I'm doing something because I have to. These emails are written, this is my friend, and I'm trying to do something to help them. And it's so clear to me, it's so obvious that this guy's a giver, it's unbelievable. So you can't fake that. That's the person that you need to be, and people will figure it out. Matchers are most of who we meet in business, certainly, not necessarily at home, and this is where it gets interesting. And takers strive to preserve an equal balance of giving and taking, giving and getting, even exchange of favors, basically a tit for tat. I'll do for you if you do for me. You know what? I want you to do for me first, and then I'll do something for you. And if you think about it, that's most of what you see, particularly in public companies, because that's the way public companies tend to be wired. But I would contend that going forward, that's not how we're all gonna stay gainfully employed and such. The real answer is to be a giver. And when you think about it, the givers that we all know are the people that we're drawn to, both personally as well as professionally. And the people that you're drawn to are the people that then you'll build trust with, that then you might trust to help you, that then you might trust to help you with a business issue, then that you might trust to meet your spouse or your significant other, and you've now developed a relationship. And that's when things become pretty cool, to be honest with you. And I've been doing this for a while, and again, it doesn't happen immediately, but my personal and professional life lately has been unbelievably rewarding, and I believe it's a big reason for it is the way that I've been networking over the years. And it's not about the money, it's about the fulfillment of helping people. And I think of all the people that I help. I tell my children I help people for a living, and you know, that's what I expect them to do as they go forward. So that's it. So everybody needs to ask yourself, you know, when you get home, as you're driving, what am I really? Am I a giver, am I a taker, or am I a matcher? And the only one you're going to fool is yourself. You're not going to fool the people around you. So I challenge everybody after this meeting to really think about who you are personally and who you are professionally, and maybe try to be more of the person you are professionally that you are personally. And that's something that everybody's on a different place on the continuum, and it comes down to being human, being willing to, you know, to let people know a little bit about yourself. Go there first, and it'll be amazing what comes back to you. All right, so an example of a giver, and I love this is from the book as well. And as I was reading this, I couldn't stop reading. All right, so a political figure in Illinois, we'll call him Samson, and there's a reason that we're going to call him Samson. It was actually a pen name that he used. Some of you might know who this is. If you do, please keep it to yourself until the end. So his goal was to be the Clinton of Illinois, and we'll get into who Clinton is or was. Ran for Senate at 23 years old. He lost to 13 other candidates. Okay. Then went into business. He was unsuccessful. He went into debt, paid back every cent, made a commitment to himself that he would pay back every cent. He was not going to burn any bridges. Ran for state legislature at 25 years old, finished second. He actually landed a seat, spent 8 years in that seat, earned a law degree along the way, was not from a privileged background. He made it happen. At 45 years old, he ran for Senate again. He had two primary opponents named Trumbull and Shields. Both of them were former Supreme Court justices. Both had privileged backgrounds. And he was ahead until a new candidate entered the race, the state's current governor, Joe Manchin. Go ahead. Shields wound up dropping out. Manchin had the potential to draw votes from the two other candidates, basically splitting the vote. Manchin took the lead. Sampson was second. Trumbull was a distant third. So Sampson started to doubt his ability to win. And Sampson was somebody who thought about the greater good, did not think about himself, but thought rather about how he fit into the greater good and how he could bring value back to the world, to be honest with you, and the world he was living in. A lot of people in the short run that are mercenary, if you will, look at people like that and they say, they're too cerebral, they're too much of a giver, you know, they're not tough-minded enough, they're not good at politics. That's true. In the short run, you might lose an election if you're not mercenary. But when you think about the people that are most endeared in the political community, they're those that are truly the givers, particularly that go back in history. So his goal was not to win the race. It was to keep Manchin from winning the race, because he and others knew that Manchin was up to no good in a lot of ways. That's actually proved to be true. So he withdrew from the race and encouraged his supporters to support Trumbull. Now, that's amazing. He basically said, I give up. I'm going to give up because if I don't, the world isn't going to get what it needs, so I'll live to fight another day. Extremely selfless behavior. He basically put his money where his mouth was, if you will. Okay? So the giving behavior resulted in Trumbull winning, thinking for the greater good over oneself, taking a long-term view. And some people looked and said, you know, this guy is pretty close to perfect, but he's too giving. He can't be trusted in a position of power because he's going to give everything away, and too easily clouded by his concern for others. Again, in the short run, that could be the case. In the long run, it just simply can't be true. Talking about how things in politics, you know, in the short run could be a disadvantage, in the long run could not be. Wound up running in a couple of additional elections, lost, but he gained supporters along the way, and the supporters he gained, interestingly, were the people he competed against. So he was building what I'll call relationship capital with people, because he was proving, I'm not about me, I'm about us and you, over and above me. And that's a way that you can certainly differentiate yourself as you network, and I suggest that you do. We're going to get into more of that as we go on. So go ahead. A few years later, he won his first election at the national level. And interestingly, his previous adversaries were his biggest supporters, and noted his past and present generous behavior. I don't know why I put and there, that's a typo. I knew I'd find one typo. I actually looked at it sitting out in the car. That's okay. Anyway, so but he did wind up winning an election, and he wound up winning, and the people that he had competed with were now his biggest supporters. And the reason for that was, again, because he proved he was selfless, he proved that he was about others, and then he got to the point where he can really add the value that he wanted to add, because people knew that he was sincere. And there was trust built between himself and his community. So, despite his losses, he was more popular. So in 1999, in 1999, C-SPAN did a poll of over 1,000 knowledgeable viewers, rating the effectiveness of Sampson and 3 dozen other politicians. Sampson came out at the top of the poll by a landslide. He was basically, despite his losses, he was more popular than any politician over time. So basically, again, it gets back to over time, behaving this way with your community, and you know, you're going to be endeared, and you're going to have a great time doing it. Anybody have any idea who this was? I'm sure somebody here knows.
Lincoln.
Thank you very much. So that's I figured, you know, especially with the movie day. So go ahead. You can click through too. So very good. Got it. All right. So just real quickly, lessons. Who was Clinton? Clinton was DeWitt Clinton. I believe he was a senator. Spearheaded the building of the Erie Canal. Clinton was also a giver, and that's who Abraham Lincoln really aspired to be. Interestingly, I found this extremely interesting. Even if it was inconvenient to him, they both looked for ways to help others sincerely, often at a personal cost. It's not about winning in the short term. Another typo. It's about winning in the long term. Take these down so we can. Sorry about that. So anyway, so it's not about winning in the short term. It's about winning in the long term. I almost put on this. It's not. I actually changed it. It's not about winning the battle. It's about winning the war. And I changed it because a lot of people, like Art of War. Everybody used to read that book from a business perspective. I don't agree. It's not about how can you beat your competition. I hate the word competition. I don't want to compete for business. If it makes more sense for John to do a project than me, fine, great. That's absolutely fine. There's room for all of us. But if it makes more sense for me to do a project, then it makes more sense. So we're not competing for business. Our clients are doing what makes the most sense. And it's our job to show them why it might make the most sense. And if it doesn't make the most sense, I'm going to send a client or a relationship to some place where it does make the most sense, because I have enough services that I can provide where we'll live to work together at another point. All right, so networking is about the long term. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It never stops. And one of the things that Gwen and I were talking about, and I'll get to Gwen in a few minutes, but because I have a few guest stars here, but is how do you practically go from networking while you're in transition to networking while you're working to networking for life, and really turning it into the way you live your life, which is really what it needs to become.